Hello. Hey everyone. Welcome everyone who's early. Welcome everyone who's already here. Everyone who's early. Hi Yapping Warrior. What Enneagram types do we have here? Hi Fairy. Hey Aiden. So in today's live stream, I will be talking about the Enneagram, of course, as you can see, and how each Enneagram self-sabotages is the title. And it's about the hidden ends of each Enneagram type, like the Enneagram Seven's hidden search for a home, or the Enneagram Three's search for approval, or the Enneagram Two's tendency to reject status and power. Hi, James. Welcome. And I'm going to be exploring some new dimensions here. That's the whole purpose of this stream, because I've been in absolute heaven over these past weeks, writing on my book on the Enneagram and describing core tendencies of each Enneagram type, but from new perspectives. And for example, one of these new perspectives is how the Enneagram 3 type deals with anxiety, fear, and anger. When looking at each of the Enneagram types, it's typically theorized that the Enneagram 3 type is primarily driven by shame. But what I've uncovered is that Enneagram 3 also tends to have strategies for managing anxiety and anger. And these tendencies have already, to some extent, been explored in Enneagram as tri-types. The tri-types were uncovered to discuss this very thing, that we all have different strategies for dealing with anger, shame, and anxiety. And a person that has a certain response to anxiety, such as pulling away into themselves, will often have a different strategy to anger or to shame. And to talk about this, because we are not always going to be driven by just one emotion, and other emotions are going to come up at us, and different emotions pertain to different things. What I tend to say is that anger has to do with our sense of judgment and right and wrong, and that we often become angry in situations where we feel that justice has been wronged, where the system or the rules have been broken, someone has cheated, someone has done something they shouldn't have. And at anxiety, for example, anxiety can have different meanings, but the way I see it, anxiety has to do with performance, how good we are at things, how hard we work, if we feel like we will ace the exam, or if we're worried that we're going to fail in it. Anxiety is what drives us to study, to learn, to improve, to self-reflect to some extent. And shame, of course, has to do with image, with how things appear, with connection to others, and with desire for approval. Now, to get this discussion going, I really want you all to lead this discussion. I want you all to talk about and to tell me what types I should be keying in on, which types I should be discussing especially. Like if we have a lot of sixes here, or sevens, or threes, maybe we should start with those types in particular. And Aiden took my test recently, and I think that he fits pretty well in the performer archetype, the Enneagram type 3. But we will see. Like it's up to you in the end to see what fits you best and to see what works for you. We apparently have a 5 here as well, so we have a good variety already. Norwegian, nice name, is a 5, perfect. So I've been working on studying how the Jungian archetypes, the lover, the sage, and the warrior, and so on, correlate with the Enneagram, because I believe they are very, very correlated. First, Jung believed there were 12 primary archetypes: the magician, the hero, the ruler, and these were all like primal personas. Like this was his primary work on personas and masks. An archetype was something we went into, focused on being or channeling energy and power from. So personas are kind of what enable us to act in the real world. Johnny here is a 9. That's also great. Yeah, we really have one of every type in here. That's perfect. That's awesome. So let me start with the performer. Carl Jung called the performer the yester, and I actually prefer the performer term, because how many people are yesters today? The performer and Enneagram 3 have a lot of similarities. The performer is often an entertainer. The performer is often a person that, let me get it up here. Get it up. Oh dear. The performer seeks success and admiration from other people, but sometimes struggles with a low sense of self-worth and a tendency to try to cover up flaws and issues in themselves. And the core motivation for the performer is to do well at the task and challenge. And it should be said, like the Enneagram 3 is a really interesting type because it's placed in the heart center, but it's not really driven by shame so much that people think. The Enneagram 3 type is kind of a weird type in the sense that it is a head type in the shame center. It is a person that is driven to work hard and to study and to improve themselves. They are very focused on constant improvement and being the best and being good at what they do. And they work very hard to use skill and ability to impress other people and to connect with others. And this is what's so interesting about the type, because it does so out of a need to gain the approval of other people. So it first tries to primarily work on its self-development. But in times when it fails, when the performer fails or struggles, the performer or the Enneagram 3 type has a tendency to want to cover up these failures or flaws to some extent, to sometimes hide and make these things disappear or to bring attention away from them. The Enneagram 3 is great for deflecting attention away from themselves. And it's I think we've all noticed this on Facebook. I think we all try to look a little better than we are to some extent. The Enneagram, on Facebook, we all try to look successful and we try to be good looking. We try to have nice pictures of ourselves. And we try to generally upload posts when we're at parties, when we're outside, or when we're doing something great. We don't upload pictures of ourselves when we're sitting on the couch eating chips, unless we have a good sense of humor. Typically, we upload pictures of ourselves to try to show a good image to other people. Now, the Enneagram 3 type will typically work a lot on this. Like they will, when successful, they will be very visible, they will be on stage, they will be taking a lot of space, and they will be expressing themselves. But when they feel bad about themselves and when they struggle with this self-worth, they tend to pull away entirely. So the Enneagram 3 has this stage personality and this behind-the-scenes personality. And this behind-the-scenes personality is often missed. They have a strong image and persona. When everything is going great, they're very vocal with themselves and good at sharing of themselves. But when they're dealing with something or struggling with something, they tend to hide themselves away from others. And this is the common tendency of the Enneagram 3 type. And this is, of course, to avoid shame and to avoid feeling shame. It's not because you're driven by shame. If you and this is like the interesting thing. It's where the Enneagram 2 type, for example, is driven by doing acts of good towards people and using that shame to better themselves and to be good for in the name of others and to do something for others. The Enneagram 3 seeks to pull away from experiences that will bring out this shame and that will make them feel this way to begin with. Now, there are things that the Enneagram 3 type does, the performer does, that are very important to recognize. Like they have a good sense of humor and they're good at using humor to deflect away from mistakes they make. So when they do slip up, they tend to laugh about it or make a joke about it, or they do something to take pressure away from themselves and to try to get this quality to become less of a problem. And they have a great sense of humor. That's one of their primary, like the best traits about them. They are typically entertaining, they're fun to be around, and they're stimulating, and yeah, they're easy to look up to and to idolize. And this is, of course, how they are at the best. And the thing with the 3 type, as well as the 7 type, and as well as the 1 type, and a lot of these like progressive types, is that they are attached to this positive emotion. Enneagram 3 type is attached to that feeling of being kind of admired by other people and having other people's approval and likes. The Enneagram 7 type is kind of addicted to that excitement and thrill of going on journeys and exploring new places and seeing new things. And the Enneagram 1 type is addicted to that experience of self-improvement and perfection and being the best and doing well at something and having that perfect experience, that flawless situation. So all of these types are to some extent addicted to a high or an emotional high, and they are often going to be and represent this emotional high. Enneagram 7s are associated with their high energy and enthusiasm to explore and to go on adventures. Enneagram 3s are admired for always being so self-satisfied and for looking so good and for being so doing so well, for being so loved and for being so appreciated. And all of these types are attached to the positive version of the emotion. Let's see what's happening here. We have Yapping, who's a 7. We have Fairy of Something, that is a 6. And we have Norwegian, that is a 5. So let's talk about the 6 for a moment there. Because I said the 7 was attached to a positive emotion or to enthusiasm, to avoiding boredom and to avoiding situations that will null them in some way. The Enneagram 6 is attached to some extent negative emotions. And this is often the case for the 6 and the 5 and the 9, for example, in the sense that they are more in a defensive state than in an aggressive state. So if we would say that the Enneagram 3 and the 7 are about experiencing as much as possible about an emotion, the 5, 6, and 9, they're much more about experiencing as little as possible of an emotion. So take the 5, for example. The 5 really does not want to feel anxious and really does not want to feel bad about themselves. So they often avoid any situation that will get them to do things that they don't feel comfortable doing. The Enneagram 9 does not want to be at fault. They don't want to make a mistake. They don't want to do something bad. They don't want to do something that is out of their character. They don't want to show bad judgment. They want to, if they can, remain innocent. And this gets them to act more defensively. Like these types are more about coming up with strategies and ways of thinking and ways of acting to avoid feeling this negative emotion, to avoid dealing with for 9, of course, anger, and for the 6 and for the 5, for its anxiety. And we have an INFJ for wing 5 here, Mayhem. Welcome. Is the chat working, by the way? Right, we need more people in there. The INFJ 4. Let's talk about the INFJ 4 for a second. I would say that what drives an INFJ to identify as a 4 is this. And the 4 is an interesting type because, of course, let's go back to the basics here first. The 4 is typically a creative type. That's the best thing about them. Like they have a really high creativity, a really strong ability to come up with innovation, to come up with art, to come up with music, and to develop all kinds of things. And the 4 I have rated as I have the notes up here. Right, the 4 I have noted as a person that has a very strong use of their first 2 letters. The INFJ 4 is going to be one of the most philosophical INFJs. The ENFJ 4 is going to be one of the most extroverted and intuitive ENFJs. They're going to be out open. They're going to be, they are to some extent ego types. They are self-aware, they're steady, and they're calm, and they're reflective to some extent. And there are 2 parts to the INFJ 4. First, they tend to be to some extent afraid of power. And this brings it up to the self-sabotaging thing. They are afraid of power and to some extent their own power and their own influence. The 4s are among the least influential figures in society. Artists and creators tend to be afraid of expressing their own voice and their own influence. They don't want to force themselves on the world or to force what they create on the world. They tend to hide their content away from people. They tend to be in this reflective state, preferably, rather than the state where they express their art or show their things off freely. So the key struggle for the 4 is this ability to show off what they're creating and to engage in this creative process and to share it with other people. That's what all creators have to struggle with when pursuing flow and when pursuing a more healthy expression. So for the INFJ, it's all about getting in touch with that feeling and judging. When you want to get more influential about your art, you also have to integrate with the feeling and judging inside of you, like your communicative skills. And what I found was after spending years and years and years thinking and reasoning and philosophizing and theorizing, to some point I realized, no, I just have to go out there. I just have to get myself out there, and I can't sit there and wait for the perfect theory or for things to be perfect forever. I have to eventually do or don't. And it was this experience and also the experience of pressure from people I loved and cared for that wanted me to accomplish things. They wanted me to gain things, to achieve things, to do something about the things I did. And they believed in my work and they thought it was good. Like this experience of someone else that wanted my to see what I had to share and to hear about it was very important for me, to get in touch with especially like feeling perceiving types that would not just come with helpful critique to how to improve the work, but would also ask questions about it and would also be very curious to learn more about it and would also test it out. They would actively test it out and see, so how can I use this and how can I see this and how can I make sense of this? This made my art much more real, or not my art, but this made the things I worked on much more real and much more important. That's great. Frank is here to start the party. Frank, what's your Enneagram type? We also have Archer, Portgas, and ENTP 7, Wing 8. Let's talk about, in relation here, if the INFJ is about getting in touch with their feeling and judging function and using their communicative skills and getting themselves out there and sharing their work, and being more comfortable having an influence on the world, then the ENTP 7, the explorer type, is going to be a person that needs to work on especially their thinking function, because this is a very inspired type that is often addicted to that high of exploration and of study and of experiencing things, but someone who needs to some extent find out what it is they care about and what is important to them. And to a thinking type, of course, what's important is rules, games, systems, and some kind of formality, in a sense, some clear objective, clear expectations, or clear goals. The explorer might benefit from making some real sitting down and actually listing down what it is they want for themselves and what kind of goals they have and what kind of things they want to experience. The explorer needs to work on, in particular, the ENTP explorer needs to work on also to some extent their thinking and perceiving, but also their extroversion and thinking. Like Frank says, it's not necessarily that simple. I can tell where thinkers tend to find flow, but of course flow is highly individual. Typically, I think what really gets an ENTP to focus and what really gets an ENTP to find a challenge is that challenge. It is to get a very, very clear challenge on themselves that they can't escape from. Like they can think of, because explorers can think of so many reasons to back out or to go somewhere else or to avoid a challenge if a challenge emerges. But if there are no ways out, I think that's also something sevens grow from a lot. Sevens grow a lot when they enter into this situation that they can't escape from. When they get cornered to some extent, then they have to stand up and they have to face it forward. Norwegian is an INTJ 5, was it? Yes, a 5. INTJ 5s, okay. Yes. INTJ 5s are going to be strong in their thinking function overall. That's one of the strongest things about them. And in particular, one of the key things for the Sage is this question of love. Like the interesting thing in many ways with the Sage is that they're always relating to this archetype called the lover. Like whenever I study 5 types and whenever I study these people who, Frank, I think it's a challenge from outside that is important also. Not necessarily like a random challenge as something at random, but I think it's some kind of outer challenge or some kind of outer goal that you start finding important. But Barney Stinson, sure, you can do that for a while. Let's see. We were talking about the 5. Yeah, right. So the 5 is typically someone that goes into themselves to study, to gain knowledge, to understand things. They are usually extremely conscientious types. They're ready to work really hard to become good at something or to gain some kind of power. And it should be mentioned, power is really, really important for the Sage overall. The Sage is all about trying to obtain a power or a skill. And it's also that when they talk about Enneagram 5, is they talk about this insecurity that drives them into this. 5 feels to some extent inferior to others in real life practical situations. And I think this is very common for an INTJ because the INTJ is all about theoretical skill and theoretical awareness. But the 5 is often someone who feels bad about their ability in comparison to other people. Other people seem to be have it so easy when they do work and when they do all kinds of things. So the 5 is trying to study to make up for this lack of natural talent. The 5 is trying to devote themselves to gaining that skill and to finding that skill and to finding that power. And I said it has to do a lot with the lover archetype, because on the opposite end of the stage is the lover. And the lover is kind of the instinct or impulse in the 5 that is the most repressed. I will find that 5s often do a lot of things out of love without realizing it. A lot of the time, 5s have this desire to kind of protect other people or someone they care about. They have like these people in their head that they idolize, or the people in their head that matter a lot to them. And the 5 is going to pursue power often with the core aim of helping someone. That's often how they motivate it. Like looking at a character like Dumbledore, or to some extent also Severus Snape and others. They're doing it, what they're doing. They're working and they're improving themselves and they're becoming the best, often while at the same time being accused of neglecting someone in their life, like their sister or someone they love. They have this desire to gain this person's love through becoming skilled and through earning. Like they believe in earning love. Like they don't believe in just getting love for the sake of love, but the 5 tends to believe that love has to be earned through skill and through being good and through improving. You can't just and the 5 really does not like popularity or shallow popularity. The 5 doesn't like when are popular for no reason. They believe they have to earn being popular. They have to work hard for it. They have to gain the skills and assets to a point that allows them the right to be liked by other people. But typically this time never comes. Like they can study endlessly. They can keep on working, and there's always a new challenge to meet. There's always something out there that says to them, sorry, you're not good enough to be appreciated by others yet. So you still have to work harder before that day comes. And that's the thing that's the thinking pattern the 5 has to break. The 5 has to sometimes become more comfortable asking other people for help when this is necessary. This is one way for the 5 to grow, but the 5 can also grow from sharing in their struggle with other people and working together with a rival or with someone else towards this feat, and finding ways to be close to other people and to become better at things without distancing themselves from others. Because this is one of the negative tendencies from the 5 is just this reclusive tendency, this tendency to go away from everyone else when you feel bad or when you feel weak. Do we have any other types we should be talking about? Yapping says because he or she is very avoidant of things they don't like. They think they are a 7. So, yeah. 7s will often be good at thinking of ways to avoid having to do something, to find a way to get other people to do it, or to find a way to avoid responsibility. 7s, if they don't want to clean, they find a way to get other people to clean. If they don't want to work, they will find a way to get other people to work. And this is also like, I heard someone that was a 7 say this really interesting thing. The 7 said that they would start up conflict when they were bored. just because they were bored. They would start up a conflict or something because they enjoyed it. Like it was more fun to have conflict than to just sit there and to do nothing. It's asking if the 6 is also a sage. No, the 6 is like a warrior. The 6 is loyal. The 6 is committed. The 6 is secure and dutiful. And the 6 and 5 are different in many ways, in the sense that, well, first, the 6 is about raising to external expectations and demands. A lot of 5s and 6s confuse themselves with each other, just as 5s and 4s tend to do it. But the 6 is someone that is defensive in the name of anger, where the 5 is defensive in the name of anxiety. So the 5 is trying to avoid experiencing this feeling of being bad or of doing poorly at something. The 6, yapping. I don't know if that was an ENTP, to be honest, but it was a 7. It was an ENFP, actually. Right. The Enneagram 6. The 6 is defensive in the name of, or to avoid anger. And it's just the thing, like the 6, what I notice about the 6 is they are system players, they are team players, they are people that work with and support everyone else in the group. The 6 often works to enforce a system of rules, a system of ideology, or a system of beliefs, not necessarily a system that they themselves believe in or agree with. The 6 can do things they disagree with. The 6 is ready to set aside their own feelings and their own sense of right and wrong to uphold the group's standards and the group's ethics, the mutual agreed thing. Because they realize, the 6s realize that if they fail or if they doubt or if they go against the system, they risk hurting the group. They risk the group falling apart. They risk the system not working anymore. And the 6 is therefore prepared to work from within the system to change it, while at the same time representing the system outwards. The 6 is really interesting to contrast against the 1, because where the 1 is quite rebellious and a catalyst of change, and someone that confronts systems and says this system is not working, change it. The 6 is much more restrained in this. They can be frustrated when the system isn't working correctly. They can feel upset when people aren't producing according to what they should. But at the end of the day, they accept it and they keep on moving with it. The 1 does not. The 1 wants things to move forward. They want to change. They want to see the steady progress and the steady improvement. And the 1 has little patience or tolerance for when things don't change. If the 1 sees things remaining stagnant, or if they bring up an issue and nothing happens, because change often does take time, the 1 will move away. Like when you talk about INFJs that Thor slam, you're talking about this Enneagram 1 instinct, this lack of patience for other people, this lack of patience for people that you want to change or that you want to do something about, where nothing happens. When you talk about the INFJ 6s, you can actually find INFJs that are quite system loyal, that are overall going to be quite rule bound. It's possible that certain MBTI types are more common to be certain Enneagram types, but try not to think about the ENTP or the ESFP as the archetypal 7, because that's not how it is. ENTP 3s, there are ENTP 5s, there are ENTP 4s. They exist. They do exist. They might not be as common as some others, but any variation is possible. What I encountered when I started setting up systems measuring people's subtypes was that, yes, ENTPs were common to score as less outgoing than the average person in the world. INTPs were common to score as outgoing types. And INTPs were common to score as 2s and 1s, and yeah, I found all these interesting differences and nuances. And that's why I believe it has much more to do with how you've developed within your personality type than what personality type you are. Now, I do believe in flavors. Like when we talk about the ruler archetype, the Enneagram 8. The Enneagram 8 is a challenger type, of course, a ruler archetype. They are communicative, they are system-oriented, they are mindful of power structures, they are likely to start up challenge or to face challenge or conflict if confronted with it. And the 8 brings up first and foremost our last 2 letters, feeling and judging, thinking and judging, thinking and perceiving, or feeling and perceiving. So an INFJ 8 is going to be someone that has or uses their communicative skills to influence other people. They are going to be they're going to be having a strong sense of ideology, this moral system that they believe in, and they will be working hard, tirelessly so, to enforce this system through their communication, through their sense of ideology. The INTJ8, the ENTJ8, for example, is going to rather use thinking and judging. They're going to play within the system. They're going to be using the system. They're going to be devising strategies. They're going to be working through a system of rules or a system of law. And they're going to be enforcing the system of law that they believe is right. So it's that different types are going to have different flavors of the Enneagram. The INFP or the ENFP8 is going to rule through strength of character and through their strong individual ethics. ENFP8s like Daenerys Targaryen, for example, is a good example. They rule through their strength of character and ethics and conviction. These ENFPs are so strong in their character, so virtuous, so brave, so tough, that other people just have no choice but to follow them. They're so inspired by this INFP or ENFP that is going to be doing and saying what's right and standing up for what's right and going to bringing up and challenging and confronting and taking risks and being brave and doing all these crazy things that other people can't help but be admired, but admire. Let's create a positive narrative rainbow cake. Wow, that's what a great username says. The Enneagram is supposed to be an esoteric journey towards enlightenment as you work your way through the types. Yes, that's what I'm finding too. I'm finding that what you should learn to do is work through the different Enneagram types and the different personas. And you're going to find out that, well, in some situations in my life, I've been tapping on this persona. In some situations in my life, I've been tapping on this persona. For example, I am a person that has transformed from the red types to the yellow. I used to be very strongly in the red types, in the red spectrum. And I am more today in the yellow spectrum. And I have some archetypes that I touch on a lot more than others. For example, I have a strong creator archetype. I have a strong sage archetype. I have a strong innocent or 9 archetype. And I found myself using all of these in different situations. In the past, I used to be very strong in Enneagram 2, and I'm still quite strong in Enneagram 2. These are strategies, learned strategies, and they are supplemented or supported by trauma and bad experiences in particular. Something happened that made us attached to this. There was something about boredom that the Enneagram 7 struggled with growing up. There was something about being weak that the Enneagram 5 felt bad about. There was something about themselves that the Enneagram 2s felt bad about. And that's why the Enneagram 2 has to prove to themselves that they are good people. And to start moving towards this, how each Enneagram self-sabotages, is I've noticed there are also 4 regressive strategies. And a regressive strategy is kind of a lash out. Remember a time where you did something that was completely stupid. Remember a time in life when you said something you don't think, when you did something you don't believe in, when you made a choice or a decision to take up a job that you didn't want. Well, that's the regressive strategy. And the regressive strategy is kind of our desire to self-sabotage. And I found that typically those types that are the most aggressive, like rulers, the creators, um, they have this strong compensating desire to self-sabotage. All types of a tendency to self-sabotage, but it's the 8 and it's the 2, it's the self-preserving types that are the most likely to self-sabotage to some extent. So an expression of this can be like, there are lots of decisions in the world that are right for other people, but not for you. Now, when we're faced with a difficult decision in life, like how should I take this job or not? Should I move or not? Should I do this or that? We have a tendency to ask other people for advice. But generally, what is right for other people is not right for us. And we have this bad desire in ourselves to mirror other people. If other people did something, we want to do it too. And I think this can often bring up this instinct or this impulse to self-sabotage. We see other people doing things and they become happy through it, and we think we will become happy if we do the same thing. But that's not generally true. If you're an INFJ, you're not going to be happy acting like an ESTJ or an ESTP. That just goes without saying. Still, some people will try, and we will all doubt ourselves to some extent. And we will call our hobbies stupid, and we will say, nobody cares about this, or this is idiotic, or people are judging me, or people are looking down at me, and I have to change. And that's what triggers this regressive lash out. The regressive lash out appears to some extent completely normal. Like to some extent, by suppressing something inside of you, you have the choice or the opportunity to express something else inside of you. If you want to have influence and if you want to have power, you have a tendency to sabotage relationships and home and your comfort, and to compromise your need for stability in order to obtain this power. If you're driven by knowledge and from learning, you have a tendency to sabotage your connection to other people and to struggle with relating to others, and to shut down your need to be around other people, like the 5 does to some extent. And the aggressive instinct is this impulse to do something that you don't want to do, but that you feel is necessary. And no Enneagram type is predominantly regressive, but all of them have these regressive traits. And I'm just beginning to work them out, really. But what I'm finding is like the regressive types are sometimes acting out of stress, lashing out, they're getting angry, they're shutting something down, they're starting up conflict, they're attacking people that they love or believe in or actually like. They're shutting themselves down, or they're harming themselves. Like, for example, creators have this tendency to, under stress, fall on their own sword. If a conflict emerges, the creator, rather than get caught up in this conflict, is typically going to want to, or feel this urge to burn themselves on the stake. They will be like, fine, if people are angry at me, I'm just going to go out there and I'm just going to put myself on the stake so other people can burn me. Just because they don't want to experience conflict, or just because they don't want to speak out and stand up for themselves. This can happen. And I believe it's very important to confront this tendency within yourself and to think about this for 1 second. Because what I'm noticing is, for example, if we're looking at the Enneagram 2 type, the caregiver is said to be prone to martyr-like behavior, and this is how they regress. When the Enneagram 2 type is regressive, they're compromising their own needs, they're compromising what they want and what they like, themselves all kinds of things. Like something I notice about deeply unhealthy twos is they give away everything they have. They have nothing, but they're still giving away. They have very little, or they're even rejecting. Like when a two is offered a position of status or importance, a job or something, they have a tendency to want to say no to it, just because they're so afraid of kind of being seen as greedy or being seen as gluttonous or materialistic. They want to be seen as good people and they want to do good. And this can sometimes go so far that it becomes regressive in the sense that they start to deny themselves good things, necessary things to be happy, like a house and home and material comforts. I've seen twos that give away or sell all their stuff, move out of home, become homeless, and have this sense of, yeah, now I'm a good person because I did this. Well, really, it has nothing to do with being a good person or not. But it's a natural way of thinking, and this is often also how we rationalize it. It feels like a very natural way of thinking. Perhaps the two believes that it will open up time to be and to do good things. And yeah, to some extent, there might be some truth in that. If you work with people who are poor, and if you deal with and try to help people, and you give up all your stuff and you become one of them, you can be a good person. But it's a system of rationalization in here that is that can be damaging. It's worth thinking about. Regressive 7. Let's see here. The 7, when regressive. I think for the 7, there is this fear of being trapped in a bad situation or in a boring environment. And the regressive 7 will, to that extent, when things start slowing down and when things aren't moving forward and when new fun things aren't happening and when there aren't any new plans or dreams or good things to come, the 7 can struggle with this a lot. The 7 really struggles with when their momentum stops because they're so attached to having this good situation, this good experience, this flow. So the regressive instinct is this tendency to, when things stop, to run away, to move away, they can go into a relationship, they can have absolute fun for a year, but then suddenly a bump hits, the economy goes bad, or the other person loses their job, or something happens, and things aren't moving forward anymore. Things are going slowly. The other partner is not being as communicative and as fun anymore. And this can be really difficult for the 7, dealing with this stagnant partner. And this regressive tendency is just this tendency to, when things are stagnating, just go away. And I've studied like characters like Lorelai Gilmore for Gilmore Girls. I think she's a good example of this. When in a relationship, things aren't moving forward, she always leaves and bolts. Sometimes for good reason, because the other person is not worth it. And this is the good thing about the 7. They won't go into a bad relationship with someone boring. They won't go into something that isn't fun or isn't going to give them energy. If the 7 feels a lack of energy and stimulation, they're usually going to leave. But sometimes they're leaving from good things that could have become good if they challenged their partner and if they did something or had the patience to accept these situations and to talk with the partners about it and to find ways out of it. The regressive tendency of the 7 is this tendency to run away. Yeah, being the 7 and the 6 are so interesting to compare in relation to each other. It's because if the 6 is someone that can enslave themselves under a bad employee or a bad workplace and work there for 10 years and hate their jobs, the 7 is a person that, oh, I worked there for 2 weeks, but then I didn't like my employee or I got bored, so I left. They're completely polar in this tendency, and they have a lot to learn from each other. It's, I think, key to both of these types integrating as true and learning from one another. I see it very well in like this indie love movie, 500 Days of Summer. There you have this desk slave who meets this Enneagram 7 type, Zoe Deschanel and Joseph Gordon-Levitt. He is working at a job he hates, putting himself off going for his dream to be an architect, or was it a lawyer? I don't remember. While she is flighty and always moving from thing to thing, and says she can't love and says she can't like settle down, and of course doesn't settle down with him. But it's still that both of them catalyze something in each other's. She gets him to start exploring his passion and to eventually leave his job. He gets her to think about what she wants in a relationship and what she wants out of love. And she eventually finds, and this is the thing about the seven won't settle for less than perfect or for what they want. When the seven wants something, they will get it, and that's the best thing about them. The seven, as long as the seven can remain in touch with that desire for the good things and to work towards that, it's all going to work out. Who in How I Met Your Mother am I? Now Frank makes me wonder about all kinds of things. I think if I was in How I Met Your Mother, I would be the most like Marshall or Lily. Yeah, Ferry, I can see that relationships wise. What I'm saying is integration is within the Enneagram typically balance. It's about recognizing the parts in yourself that want to settle down. And that's the thing about the seven. The seven searches for a home. The seven searches for a place that they can settle down. The seven feels maybe not at home with their family or with the people in their life. They don't feel happy or satisfied in the relationship they're in. And they want to find this good thing, this sense of fun, this place that they can enjoy and make home. And the seven is always moving towards that and eventually finds that. Like Lorelai Gilmore found her home in Stars Hollow. After running away from her family and after everything that happened, she found her home. She found a kid. Well, she had a kid. And she found a workplace and she got a normal desk job and she got all of that. And that's what they were moving towards all along. It's if you get stuck in this and if you hold on to this that it becomes really bad. It's if you stop, if you keep moving forward, if you keep jumping from thing to thing, if you never settle, if you keep being attached, and if you don't look outside this, that it becomes bad, that it becomes difficult for yourself and others. And I think it's hard in a relationship when you have a partner that you know has faults and issues, when you meet a partner that is struggling with something and they simply won't change no matter what. That's the worst thing in a relationship, when nothing ever changes. We need to change to some extent to stay alive, and change for good, of course, to learn new things about ourselves, to learn new things about what we love, to find new passions, and to keep moving forward. Very few people keep on or maintain the same passions they had when they were kids. Most people outgrow their interests and their passions and they go into new fields, new things, and that's also something. People get attached to their old selves and their old challenges and their old issues. So like Enneagram 4 types get all attached to this old version of themselves. they get attached to who they used to be in a relationship or at home or with their parents, and they maintain this even if it's not right for them anymore, even if they don't find happiness in it, even if they don't like it or enjoy it. They still think, this is me, this is who I am. Even if I hate it, and even if it sucks, and even if I'm boring myself to death like this, it's me, and I won't change, and I can't change, and I am afraid of change. Often what an attachment looks like, this inability to change. So it's time to me to start rounding off this video. Thanks to everyone who's joining in. I want to show you all it's not ready yet, but it will be very, very soon. This book on all the Enneagram types, on the Jungian personas, and how these Enneagram types and personas fit together with your MBTI type, and how they interrelate and how they pull on each other's and draw from each other's. Through this, hopefully you'll become more aware of how you think and how you feel and how you deal with emotions and how you handle various situations, and hopefully it will get you reflecting on your current habits, your lifestyle, and where you're going in life. I'm calling this one Carl Jung and the Enneagram and the personas we draw power from. I hope it will be out soon, and I hope that you will all enjoy it.